parties that control the entertainment industries, because he'd become a bit of a pain in the arse and a bit of a thorn in the side of the establishment by way of some of the things that he was starting to talk about in interviews. You know, he had mentioned 9/11 and questioned the official narrative of it. He had talked about chemtrails in an interview on a chat show, which is something that celebrities aren't supposed to do. He even apparently made a comment about the genocidal Jews that run the entertainment industry is the reason I will never play Israel. And you can imagine why a comment like that would cause him to fall out of favour with certain parties. So it's certainly my view that Prince was done away with. Then you get artists like Elvis Presley and Jim Morrison, where, from what I've seen, it would appear to be the case that their deaths didn't actually occur the way we're told they did. And in some way, they were faked. They were hoaxes. So with Elvis Presley, when you get into his background, he would appear to have been connected to the CIA and to the police forces of various cities. And some researchers have even suggested that when he went out on tour around the world, ostensibly as an entertainer, he was actually undertaking covert sort of spying missions on behalf of, you know, these parties that he was involved with. And you hear that with a lot of artists. Certainly the famous escapologist Harry Houdini would almost certainly appear to have been working as a spy when he went around the world with his stage act, with his illusory show, you know. And this seems to be the case with a lot of entertainers, because their line of work enables them to get into lots of different parts of the world where otherwise their presence might be scrutinized and they might find it difficult to get visas or whatever. But if you go in as an entertainer, then you tend to get a green light to go everywhere. So it's something that you hear with Elvis Presley. And there are many strange elements involving his funeral. There are people that were present at that ceremony that say the body in the casket that was passed off as Elvis looked nothing like him. And there have even been witness reports from people that were there that have said the body appeared to have beads of sweat on the brow and that the hairpiece appeared to be glued on. It wasn't Elvis. And you ask yourself, how would it be possible for an artist to fake their death like this? It could only happen with massive complicity from the intelligence services and from the police and the judiciary, you know, friends in high places. You've got to be connected. You've got to be in with certain organizations to be able to pull something like that off. So you hear the same sort of thing with Jim Morrison. The official story is that he died in a bathtub in his Paris apartment after taking some kind of overdose in July 1971. But there's equally a whole bunch of anomalies and discrepancies with the official story there. And it certainly suggests that Jim Morrison may well not have died at that time as we're told he did. And going back to those family connections that we spoke about, where he's linked back into the military intelligence communities, you start to understand how there could have been complicity from those organizations in covering up his death. So that's a couple of interesting ones. A lot of people that have looked into the circumstances surrounding David Bowie and his reported death in January this year have found a lot of discrepancies as well. And it's caused people to question whether his death may have been a hoax. You know, is he in fact still alive somewhere? Very difficult to know, but certainly there's question marks hanging over it. And like I say, with certain other deaths, it certainly seems to be the case that these artists are no longer with us. Whitney Houston seems to be a pretty open and shut case, although the method that she was done away with in seems to be steeped in dark, occult, ritualistic practices. You know, it certainly seems to have been a ritual sacrifice in terms of many aspects of what happened to her. And we get this with a lot of artists as well. Michael Jackson, probably a similar scenario. You know, some people claim that Michael Jackson may still be alive. That may have been a hoax of some sort. It's very difficult to know for certain. You can only speculate and go with your best guess based on the information that's available to you. But going back over the decades in the music industry and the entertainment industry generally, so bringing in Hollywood movies as well, there has been a huge amount of early deaths. People that have died at ridiculously young ages, you know, in their 20s, in their 30s, even their 40s and 50s. You know, dying at 52 is too young. That is not a full life. And a lot of these deaths have been attributed to suicides and accidental overdoses. And again, going back to something I was talking about earlier, they seem to be able to get away with a lot of these artists passing away at these young ages by chalking it all up as a consequence of the industries that they're a part of. Everyone knows that pop stars and actors are into drugs and alcohol and all kinds of edgy lifestyles, and it's just what happens. So you hear about these artists taking an overdose of heroin or something, and most people are just prepared to say, well, that's the way it goes. That's the way it goes in these industries. And even the suicides, because people say, well, they go a bit crazy, don't they? They go a bit crazy with the pressure of fame, and I guess some of them just kill themselves. So that's how they get away with it all. But, it just leads me to wonder how many suicides and accidental overdoses have been nothing of the sort. And again, when you read Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, Dave McGowan's book, he documents the ridiculous amount of people that have died at these young ages. And it's not just rock stars and musicians, it's also their entourage. So you often find that managers and band members and close friends and family members of these people die in very bizarre, very suspect circumstances. And I think there's far more to know about so many of these cases that can't be adequately chalked up as suicides or overdoses. It seems to be a very convenient way of explaining a very high death count.
Exactly. And of course, we touched on this earlier, but I was talking about the psychotronic weapons and the remote tactical hardware they can use to basically brain hack a target. But that would actually influence the target insofar as pushing them like an entity or a demonic force would, insofar as pushing them into possible death or suicide or thoughts of suicide. So all that stuff can actually come into play there.
And Solaris, just to pick up on something you were saying there about the possibility of induced heart attacks and even induced suicides, it's something that's certainly of interest to me because, I consider that this is something that probably does go on. And when I consider the notion of induced heart attacks, there's always three people that I think of. One of them is the leader of the Labour Party in the UK going right back to the 1990s. It was a guy by the name of John Smith. He became the leader of the Labour Party in 1994, I believe it was. And very soon afterwards, he just happened to die of a heart attack. And his successor was Tony Blair. And Tony Blair went on to be the British Prime Minister that oversaw 9/11, 7/7, the murder of Princess Diana, and so many other things. So it's often struck me that Tony Blair was very much the control system's man that they wanted in place in time for the Labour Party's election victory in 1997, which finally saw the Conservatives kicked out after almost 20 years of power. So it does make me wonder whether John Smith's heart attack, conveniently timed as it was, could have been something that was triggered to get him out the way, to give an excuse to bring Tony Blair in. Then there's the politician Robin Cook. And at the time of the Gulf War invasion, the Iraq invasion that was launched in the wake of 9/11 in March 2003, people probably recall there was this whole thing about Saddam Hussein allegedly having weapons of mass destruction that could be launched in 45 minutes and all this sort of thing. It was blatant fear-mongering of the general public, and it was a way of, in a problem reaction solution style and fashion, justifying the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. So, of course, all the politicians of the time went along with it, with the exception of this one guy, Robin Cook, who was part of Tony Blair's Labour cabinet. And Robin Cook questioned the validity of this claim of these weapons of mass destruction and was very vocal about it. And he kind of broke ranks. It's something that politicians aren't supposed to do, go off script. Very soon afterwards, we hear that Robin Cook just happens to have tragically died of a heart attack while he was out climbing in Scotland on holiday. So that's him off the scene. And then another one is Stanley Kubrick, the film director, who at the time of the release of his movie Eyes Wide Shut, which was very revealing, particularly in those scenes that were shot in the Rothschild mansion, which depicted that kind of elite party that was going on. Very revealing, I would suggest, in terms of stuff that really does go on with celebrities and famous people and prominent politicians and stuff that go to these wild orgies. We hear about these events where ritual sex magic goes on, and there's initiation ceremonies into the higher ranks of these secret societies, and a lot of that seemed to be communicated through Kubrick's movie Eyes Wide Shut. And a lot of researchers into Kubrick are of the opinion that he went one step too far in terms of what he attempted to communicate through that movie. And isn't it interesting that just at the time of its release, he just happens to have died of a heart attack? So when you were mentioning induced heart attacks and these things that can be triggered remotely, it always makes me think of those three individuals. And there's probably many more cases of this going on than we know about.
I totally agree with you. Well, I do know, obviously, there's a technology that can do that. It's odorless and tasteless. It's hard to detect. And, for the best forensics investigator, they probably wouldn't know what happened. They probably think natural causes right there. But I have to ask you, do you think, and obviously you probably do, but Princess Diana, was that a ritual sacrifice?
There are certain ritualistic elements to it, yeah. And some of them parallel very much what happened with JFK back in 1963. It seems to be a Masonic style ritual with a lot of symbolism present there, not least the fact that Diana died in this tunnel that was known as Pont de l'Alma, which translates as Passage of the Moon Goddess. And Diana was one of the many expressions of the sacred feminine, the goddess, the mother goddess in creation. You also have Isis and Semiramis going back into ancient Egypt and ancient Babylon, and there's Britannia and so many other depictions of the moon goddess. And Diana was a name that the ancient Romans had for this moon goddess figure. So straight away there's these occultic kind of elements to her name and the place where this tragic accident just happens to have taken place. And, there has to have been massive complicity on the part of the rest of the royal family and the security services, MI5, MI6, in terms of bringing that one off. And it makes me wonder how much Tony Blair knew about it as well, because every year that guy was elected for another term in office. So 1997, you had the murder of Princess Diana, because that's surely what it was. And then 2001, he gets back into office and 9/11 goes down. And then 2005, he's in for a third and final term. And 2005 is the year of the 7/7 terror attacks in London. So, very interesting timings going on there. But as far as I'm concerned, Diana was a ritual sacrifice. There's many other elements of it that you can get into, which we don't have time for right now. But there's so much more to know than the official version of Henri Paul was drunk. Wasn't it tragic?
Exactly. Well said indeed. And of course, I look at it as a supernatural. There's a strong supernatural pulse in this whole ordeal insofar as what's going on here on a mass mind control level. And to me, it seems like they've really weaponized the occult insofar as taking something that's exotic and occult oriented, but actually interfacing it with a covert type of technology to enhance and modulate and actually manipulate a reality to some degree.
Sure. And the thing about the occult is people have been so conditioned by that word to think of it as meaning evil or being synonymous with something bad. And it's not that. The occult is simply that which is hidden from view, that which is not readily available or not in common sight, but is available to be discovered should anyone have the will to look into it. And occult practices can be used for benevolent, uplifting means just as much as for controlling, enslaving, malevolent means. So it's just the fact that the Satanists and the dark occultists that we have running the show in this world and presiding over industries like the music industry and Hollywood and everything else have taken it upon themselves to understand the nature of reality and how these forces work. And they've sought to infiltrate it and hijack it and bring it into their own circle for their own nefarious means. But it doesn't have to be that way. It didn't have to have turned out like that. At any point, the rest of us, humanity, can regain our power by tapping into these forces and these methods and these tactics and using them for good and for the side of love and the side of upliftment of humanity and a better deal for all of us and a better future, if we would learn to tap into it the way the occultists have. We hear so many times that the frequencies involved with love and positivity are so many times more powerful than the low density fear-based stuff, the evil stuff that they keep us all engulfed in. And the reality that we have at this time could be overwritten with one which is so much better at any time that enough of us want it and are prepared to harness it and do what's necessary to bring it into place. That's the good news in all of this. We can change it any time we want, any time enough of us want it. It has to be done in numbers. There has to be a bringing together of our will and our intent. But I think most people in the world would like to shake off this evil control system that we have and have a better future for our children. And that can happen. We've just got to realize it and then apply it.
Yeah,
and
breaking the spell.
That's why we have to hammer home this information the whole time. That's why I do so many radio interviews like this, and so many other researchers do as well. We just have to keep hammering home this information, getting the message out there for as long as this work becomes necessary. And it may well be the case that we don't see any great results in our lifetimes. It might take another few generations for things to really turn around. If that's the case, we can't stop doing the work. We've still got to do what needs to be done and keep that end result in sight for as long as it's necessary to do it. Who knows how long it will take, but the work continues nevertheless.
I agree. And Mark, we're just about out of time here. I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been an honor to interview you and a pleasure. And I'm very impressed with your level of knowledge and information. It's incredible. So I do thank you, and I hope to have you back at some point in the continuum. And also, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. And please stay tuned for... Oh, of course, I have to thank my wonderful producer here, Tina Marie, who's the station owner who makes this network happen. And tune in next week for when my special guest will be Tony Bruschi. And stay tuned for The Grind here, exclusively here at KCOR Digital Radio Network. And is there anything else? I think we have 1 or 2 minutes plus or minus, but I'd like to give the audience a rundown insofar as how to get in touch with you and access your website and all that good stuff.
Sure. Well, the main website is markdevlin.co.uk. My YouTube channel, which has got a bunch of videos from conference talks that I've done that people might like to get into. It adds further detail to a lot of the stuff I've spoken about tonight. That's youtube.com/markdevlintv. You can look for me on SoundCloud if you just put in, I think it's Mark-Devlin to find me on there. You can get my Sound of Freedom and Good Vibrations podcast series on SoundCloud. The book, Musical Truth, is on Amazon. It's also on Barnes & Noble. And if anyone wants to reach out to me by email, feel free to connect with me on mark@markdevlin.co.uk. And I can send you out a book, a signed copy, if you want to do it that way. And I'm happy to correspond with people as well. And also, I'm coming over to the US next year, April. I think it's the 7th to the 9th of April for the Free Your Mind Conference, which is Langhorne, Pennsylvania, just outside Philadelphia. Absolutely awesome event. I've been for the last couple of years. Going to be doing a talk. There's all kinds of other incredible speakers on the bill. So if people want to come and connect with me there, get along to the Free Your Mind Conference, freeyourmindconference.com for all the info. Perfect. Well, Mark, it's been a pleasure and an honor, and I hope to see you again soon on the show. So thank you for joining us. Great stuff. Thanks for having me on. My pleasure. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great week. You are listening to Solaris Bluraven's Hyperspace. Stand by. All right, in 3, 2, 1. You've been listening to Hyperspace. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Bluraven, where the truth is beamed to you at the speed of light. Live every Friday night at 9 p.m. Pacific. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on the host of Hyperspace, Solaris Bluraven, please visit her website at nightshadowanomalydetectives.com. Hyperspace. Once thought a theoretical dimensional anomaly, now a tangible cosmic waveform to the truth. Hyperspace. This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51. Wait, that doesn't exist. This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.